Okay, I want to do 3 quick examples of how to record the end of year adjusting journal entry for bad debt expense in order to hit a targeted estimate of uncollectible accounts that we want in the allowance account. So let me get out of the way and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. I've got 3 different scenarios here. And in each one of them, let's see if I can get this out of the way. In each one of them, we have $70,000 of accounts receivable. And we've analyzed the customer accounts making up that total, maybe with an aging schedule, but we've estimated that $3,400 of that 70 is uncollectible. So that means that the target balance for the allowance account is $3,400. We want this allowance account to have $3,400 credit balance because that will offset the $70,000 on the balance sheet. So down here at the bottom, I've got in the assets section, we've got accounts receivable of 70, and we want to offset it by $3,400. Okay, in the first example, we have $250 debit balance in the allowance account, right? So we're at the end of the year. We're about to make the adjusting entry. We want $3,400 in here, and right now it has a $250 debit balance. So it has a debit balance because the last time we set up the allowance, we didn't put enough in there, and we overran. We wrote off more than we had allowed for. So we're going to have to make up for that by recording a little extra expense this year to catch up with it. So in other words, the adjusting entry in this case would be the $3,400 plus we have to offset the $250, so that would be $3,650. So when we debit bad debt expense for $3,650 and then credit the allowance, so the credit for the allowance account of $3,650, and that brings the ending balance over here to $3,400, which is what we were after, and that brings the net accounts receivable down to $66,600. In the second example, when we got to the end of the year, we still had $350 as a credit balance in the allowance account. So last time we set up the allowance, we put more in there than we needed. So that offsets how much we have to put in this time. So to get to the $3,400 balance that we're after, our journal entry will only need to be $3,050. Debit to bad debt expense and credit to the allowance account. And when we put $3,050, when we post that to the allowance, that now brings the allowance account down to that $3,400 that we wanted it to be. So again, it brings the net accounts receivable down to $66,600. And then finally, the last example, if we had $400 as a debit balance, meaning we didn't have enough in there last time, which means we didn't expense enough last time. So we have to expense more this year to make up for that. So that to hit a $3,400 here, that would be $3,800. So we would debit bad debt expense, $3,800, credit the allowance, $3,800. And when we post that, of course, the debit goes to bad debt expense, the allowance to the allowance account of $3,800. And that brings the ending balance down to $3,400 that we were after. And again, that brings the net accounts receivable down to the collectible amount of $66,600. So remember that the only time you touch bad debt expense is in the end of year adjustment. And you're going to have to expense whatever it takes to hit the target that you have established.